I know what you're thinking about. No, not Christmas presents. I'm talking about New Year's resolutions. And what better New Year's resolution is there than a good old fashioned detox? That's why December is detox month here on this YouTube channel. And in my previous video, you'll recall that I talked about two must haves for any good detox and a third bonus item. The bonus item that's really nice to have if you can do it. But I made a note that not everybody should do it. And actually, a lot of people who watch this particular channel really shouldn't be doing this yet. And that third bonus nice to have thing, of course, is caloric restriction or fasting. Now, I'm going to talk a lot from firsthand experience in addition to clinical experience because a couple of these things have affected me directly. And later in my life, I have developed a fasting practice that I enjoy very much. So I'm going to be speaking about my experience with that in addition to what I've seen with patients. Now, first and foremost, category one of people who should not do caloric restriction or fasting for the sake of detoxification is people who are already malnourished or not getting enough calories in the first place. So I see this a lot with the IBS and the SIBO crowd. People are restricting their diet and dropping weight unintentionally and not getting enough nourishment, either because a healthcare provider told them to do a really restrictive diet like low FODMAP or AIP and did not provide them with the adequate guidance to ensure that that person is nourished, or they are restricting because they have symptoms when they eat, right? Like if you get bloated and pain and distension and you look pregnant every time you eat, you're just naturally not going to want to eat as much or as often. So I find that a lot of people with IBS or SIBO are already very under their calorie need and very under their vitamin and mineral need to begin with. And I think it would be incredibly silly, if not overtly dangerous, to ask that person to do a fasting protocol. Now, ironically, this crowd oftentimes does try fasting because it's supposed to be good for the migrating motor complex and your motility. But again, I stress if you are undernourished and you're not even getting adequate calories or vitamins or minerals, you can't pour from an empty cup. That's really what it boils down to. You can't pour from an empty cup and you can't do fasting and expect a health promoting effect if you are already undernourished or malnourished. Now, kind of tangentially related to that, but not exactly the same thing. If you struggle with hypoglycemia right now, I would advocate not fasting at the moment. Now, I say at the moment because I myself struggled with pretty notable hypoglycemia back when I had tummy problems. Back when I had IBSD and I was bloated all the time and having diarrhea and I was reacting to all of the foods on planet Earth, I also had low blood sugar. So if I went more than like 3 or 3.5 hours without a snack or a meal, I would get really woozy and lightheaded. Sometimes I'd almost like kind of black out a bit, or I would just get kind of hangry and like fuzzy brained. So I was the person who would eat breakfast, then I would have a mid-morning snack, then I would eat lunch, then I'd have my afternoon snack, then I'd have dinner, then I would have my post-dinner pre-bedtime snack, and that's how I ate for many, many years. Now, the important thing about that is that since I healed my gut and I've done a lot of work on myself and my nutrition over the years, I'm now much healthier and more resilient. And I can actually not only eat like a normal person and do 3 square meals a day for most of my days, but I can also do fasting now. So if you're sitting there at home and you're thinking, oh, bummer, I can't do fasting because of my stupid hypoglycemia, don't worry, that can change. I know because it changed for me. Like I said, I had to have 6, maybe 7 meals a day back in the day. And now I can go 3 full days fasting and feel great doing it. But it might just not be something that you're ready for yet if you're still struggling with low blood sugar. Now, that actually segues beautifully into my story, which is a little bit about my own fasting practice and how I discovered this third group of people who should not do fasting yet. So, long story short, I got into fasting kind of gradually. I started playing with like Prolon and that sort of thing. And then I got into actual, real, bona fide 0 calorie fasting. And I started with a day and then 2 days, and then eventually got up to 3 very comfortably. And I was doing a lot of this experimenting in the year or so leading up to the pandemic. So 2019 and early 2020, I was experimenting with fasting and doing really great with it. And then 2020 happened, the world spontaneously combusted, everything went to hell in a handbasket. And I felt like I was handling it reasonably well. right? Like I was kind of laughing at the absurdity around me, and I was like, oh yeah, this is the end of times. But I felt like I was doing pretty okay. But my body was screaming at me that I was much more stressed than I even realized. I started losing a lot of hair, and I started having some other symptoms that I haven't talked about before. But in all of this, one of the things that tipped me off that I was dealing with a lot more stress and a lot more stress chemistry than I realized is that I lost my ability to fast. Now, I didn't develop hypoglycemia again. I wasn't undernourishing myself. I really firmly believe it was the stress chemistry that did it. So, what would happen is I would do my fasting practice and I would muscle my way through the first day. And then I would have to cut it short almost always on the first day because I would try to go to sleep and I just couldn't sleep. Like I would be wide awake, tossing and turning and tossing and turning. I remember one time distinctly, I tossed and turned for hours and I kept, I would sometimes glance at my phone. And finally, I just said, uncle. And I said, you know what, body? Screw it. I'm going to feed you. And I got up at 2 o'clock in the morning. I made myself a huge He-Man breakfast. I'm talking like 4 eggs, avocado toast, the whole 9 yards. And I ate that giant breakfast at 2 o'clock in the morning, sat around upright for maybe half an hour because I didn't want to lay down immediately after that. And then I went to bed and I slept like a freaking baby. And again, like the only thing I could figure is that it was the stress chemistry. And what's wild is even after the pandemic slowly resolved and we got back to, not masking and not social distancing and feeling like life was back to normal, it took me a good solid 2 years to get my ability to fast back. So from early 2020 all the way through until about summer of 2022, I could not do fasting. And I tried many, many times. And I just got the same results every time. I would either get hypoglycemia symptoms, or I couldn't sleep, or I just felt bad. And it wasn't until later in the year in 2022, 2 years after the beginning of the pandemic, that's when I could finally do it again. During that time, I also took a bunch of adaptogens. I developed this new painting hobby, and I started doing a lot more self-care because, again, there were other symptoms that tipped me off to the fact that my stress chemistry was probably high. But my point remains, if you are dealing with a lot of stress right now, or if you know that your stress chemistry like cortisol is really high, or if you feel like you are constantly stuck in fight or flight mode or survival mode, you probably won't have the best time fasting. And it might even be difficult, if not impossible, for you to do. Instead, you would be much better off trying to work on that stress and trying to work on your mental health, and perhaps even taking some herbs to help you, like adaptogens, rather than jumping into fasting. And similar to the hypoglycemia crowd, it's not a never again kind of thing. If you nourish yourself, if you could get your blood sugar back to a point where you can eat 3 square meals a day and not feel terrible, and if you can get your stress and your mental health in a better spot, all of those people could do fasting eventually. But those three things are going to make it really difficult, if not impossible, to do fasting right now. And that's the purpose of this video. So if any of those three scenarios sound like you, I would highly recommend against fasting at this time. If you want to do a detox anyway, I'm going to talk about a lot of other strategies and some supplements here on this channel. And we're going to talk about how to do a proper detox. Or honestly, pivot entirely. Is a detox really the best thing for you to do right now? Maybe said another way, is a detox going to be the thing that makes a difference in your symptoms? Because you're here because you don't feel good. I'm assuming, unless you're a super big nerd, you are here because you have symptoms that you don't want to have anymore. And you're looking to cure something like bloating, indigestion, constipation, diarrhea, abdominal pain, or abdominal bloating. You have been given the label of IBS or leaky gut or SIBO, candida or dysbiosis, and you're trying to figure out how to fix that or how to get rid of that. And yes, a detox is one of the many, many things that the internet would have you do. But I'm going to be honest with you and tell you that that's not going to be very effective for those symptoms or those diagnoses. People in that type of situation with those diagnoses and those symptoms have much bigger fish to fry before they should ever think about something like fasting or detoxification. So instead of wasting your time, effort, and money doing a detoxification program, which ultimately is not going to get you where you want to go, and it's just going to go into this library of stuff I tried once, but it didn't do jack shit for me, I really, really implore you to check out FODMAP Freedom in 90 days. We're not enrolling quite yet in the month of December, but come January, we're going to be opening the doors again. And in that program, I can provide you with the education and the tools and the coaching to finally get over those symptoms and those diagnoses that I rattled off earlier. I help people diminish bloat. I help people poop like champions. And I help people tolerate all of these high FODMAP foods again inside of FODMAP Freedom. And I know you can do it too. So if any of that resonated with you, I would check out the link down below. You could join the wait list now, and that way you're the first in line and you could put dibs on your seat before we potentially fill up again. And I would be really honored to start my new year with you and help you finally accomplish this New Year's resolution of getting rid of these tummy problems and becoming a normal person.